Discover the incredible foods medieval peasants ate to survive harsh winters, a touching journey. Clara stood in the attic, dusty beams overhead creaking with forgotten stories. In her hands lay her grandmother's old journal, the cracked leather cover whispering secrets of a time when survival was an art. Tales of peasant struggles floated to the surface: starvation, resilience, and the uncanny ability to transform the mundane into sustenance. Yet, as she flipped through the fragile pages, the weight of her own battle hung heavily in the air. Every day felt like a calculation, a tightrope act of balancing rent, bills, and groceries with the laughter and dreams she yearned to nurture in her 10-year-old son, Tommy. How could she shape a better life for him when every dollar stretched like a rubber band, threatening to snap? As Clara nestled on the attic floor, she could hear Tommy's playful laughter wafting up from the living room, filling her with warmth but also with an ache. The facade of joy felt precarious. The reality of their financial strain loomed like a storm cloud, ever present. Could she really create a life for him that didn't feel like a race against desperation? The thought of preparing yet another uninspired meal from the bare pantry left her feeling hollow. But suddenly the words from the journal caught her eye: simple yet revolutionary recipes that could transform what little they had into something extraordinary. Curiosity ignited within her, and she imagined how these rustic dishes might not only feed them but perhaps offer a taste of culture, tradition, and connection to something larger than their burdensome existence. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But as Clara began to infuse her meals with these forgotten recipes, a cloud of doubt overlapped the initial excitement. Tommy delighted in the absurdity of a turnip stew and giggled as they tried to imagine medieval life. Yet, Clara often caught disdainful glances from the wealthier neighbors at the market, their polished, judging eyes sinking like stones in her stomach. Their laughter and whispering clinks of silverware echoed the insidious voices in her mind, reminding her that she was just a struggling single mother, playing peasant with her state-of-the-art microwave. The devastation of feeling like her cooking this intimate representation of her family history had become a source of ridicule burrowed deep into her bones. What if they were right? What if authentic could never trump privilege? As these thoughts twisted into knots in her mind, Clara learned about a cooking contest, an opportunity to not only showcase her culinary creations but to gain respect, recognition, validation. This could be the moment that shifted everything. But how to navigate the treacherous waters when the elite stood ready to judge her every move, to draw lines sharper than the knives she wielded? Yet hidden beneath the pancake flour and expired spices, Clara found an old wooden spoon, her grandmother's heirloom. Its worn surface begged to be wielded with purpose, reigniting a fierce determination in Clara's heart. She belonged in this world, even in her most vulnerable state. But this notion collided viciously with the thought of facing her rival, a chef notorious not just for their talent but for an endless vault of privilege. As the contest threatened to expose her insecurities, Clara felt her world tremble, forcing her to confront not just the culinary challenge ahead but the shadows of doubt lurking behind her self-worth. Was she truly enough? Would she let fear dictate her legacy? With the competition looming, Clara found herself standing at the precipice of an uncharted territory, the stakes impossibly high. The next day dawned, and Clara awakened with a sense of resolve. The crisp sunlight filtering through the kitchen window hinted at possibilities yet unwritten. She had never felt more aware of her surroundings, every corner of her home echoing with potential. Dusting off her grandmother's journal again, she decided to immerse herself completely in the stories and recipes within. Each page became an exploration of legacy, of a lineage that had survived against all odds. With every turn, Clara felt the whispers of her ancestors urging her onward. Her first task was straightforward. Using the humble ingredients in her pantry, she would prepare a series of traditional dishes. This wasn't just about cooking. It was a transformational exercise, a manifestation of her intent to weave herself into the fabric of this culinary journey. She methodically penned out a meal plan, each dish selected for its simplicity yet robust flavors, deeply rooted in the survival strategies of past generations. It was no longer just a task. It was a practice in empowerment, proving to herself that she could create, despite the constraints imposed by her daily grind. As she set about preparing a rustic barley soup, Clara began to recount her own experiences with food, how meals had been the moments to create cherished memories with Tommy, the times she felt connected to her heritage, and even the moments of vulnerability she shared while pinching pennies. The act of chopping vegetables became cathartic. Slicing through the roots fed her spirit. The sense of simmering broth enveloped her like a warm embrace, surrounding her with a sense of purpose. Clara's confidence swelled each time Tommy wandered into the kitchen, his curious eyes lighting up at the sight of bubbling pots and fragrant herbs. His questions sparkled with innocence, and as she answered, she realized the lessons were reciprocal. Not only was she teaching him about cooking, but she was also sharing stories of resilience and familial pride that were far richer than any extravagant display of wealth could offer. Later that night, as they sat together at the old wooden table, Clara felt a shift within her. They scooped up the steaming soup, its earthy tones inviting conversation and laughter. Tommy delighted in the simple pleasure, cleaning his bowl with enthusiasm, and for the first time in a long while, Clara felt a flicker of hope. Every spoonful she served reaffirmed the belief that meals transcended poverty. They were moments of connection, tradition, and love. The next morning, the looming contest was impossible to ignore. As the date approached, Clara wrestled with a blend of anticipation and trepidation. Would the judges appreciate the heart behind her dishes, or would her humble offerings be deemed insufficient against the backdrop of polished competition? Each day was a mix of practice runs and self-reflection, dictated by the clock as it ticked toward the anticipated moment. She envisioned the prestigious venue, the audience of culinary elites, and the crisp, unforgiving judgment that awaited. Clara's resolve solidified further as she captured each recipe in her grandmother's journal, adding her own notes, a personal chronicle of transformation. Every entry reinforced her sense of belonging to this culinary narrative, shifting her perspective from sheer survival to vibrant participation. The act of inscribing her journey breathed life into the very essence of what she was attempting, taking ownership not only of her cooking but also of her identity. As she hovered over the page, another weight settled in. What if she won? The question caused her heart to race. Winning could mean validation, but it also brought the specter of jealousy and resentment from those who were unsatisfied with their lot. Would she be able to face them squarely? The contest was fast becoming not just a culinary challenge, but a definitive confrontation with her past and present wrapped up in a battle for recognition and self-worth. In the midst of her preparation, Clara made a decision to infuse her cuisine with stories, to wear her vulnerability as armor. The competition would be a stage, her creations an apt reflection of her journey. But as the day approached, uncertainty pricked at her subconscious, drawing her into its web. Had she truly prepared enough to face the chef who represented everything she feared, privilege, expertise, and judgment? Suddenly it was time to confront her deepest fears both in the kitchen and within herself. All she had worked for would be tested in an instant, propelling her toward a personal and culinary reckoning. With the contest looming closer, Clara steeled herself for what lay ahead, knowing that whatever the outcome, this chapter of her life was just one step in the journey she was crafted to navigate. The moment of truth approached, and she could no longer ignore its inevitability. Would she rise above the self-doubt, or would this be yet another reminder of her limitations? The answer awaited her on the horizon, shrouded in uncertainty but glimmering with promise. The days dwindled down to a pulse-quickening countdown, each sunrise ushering in another layer of anxiety interwoven with excitement. Clara methodically set to refining her recipes, each iteration a mixture of ancestral memories, bold risks, and emotional release. The kitchen transformed into a sanctuary where flour dust danced in sunbeams, a place that felt more like home than mere residence. She began to relish the rhythmic dance of chopping and stirring, the weight of each action carving out her identity as a chef, yet beneath the surface, unease simmered like the broth she often crafted. What if her passion proved insufficient? Her mind vacillated between confidence and crippling self-doubt. She meticulously laid out each dish, but the nagging expectation of the contest gnawed at her resolve. The judges were formidable. Many were veterans of the culinary world. Did she even belong among them? The specter of her insecurities loomed large. In the quiet of the night, Clara found herself faced with other, more profound questions as she clutched her grandmother's journal. It was not merely a collection of recipes but a tapestry of her family's stories, threaded with strife, survival, and determination. She wondered about the margins hidden within every dish. What if her recipes failed to resonate? What if the judges were unmoved by the love woven into every bite? Clara inhaled deeply, determined to channel her fear into fuel for her craft rather than allow it to cripple her creativity. The contest night loomed ever closer, and with it came an unexpected burst of insight. She had been so focused on impressing others that she neglected the heart of what she represented, her truth. Leaning against the kitchen counter, Clara recognized that the judge's approval didn't need to validate her worth as a person or a chef. Cooking was more than competition. It was an act of defiance against her discomfort, a means of reclaiming the joy that had forged her identity through shared meals with her son. With renewed intensity, Clara began to experiment with her foundational dishes. She infused her barley soup with herbs coaxed from her small, thriving plant garden, picking flavors both familiar and unexpected. As ingredients blended, her previous anxieties gradually dissolved into the aromatic steam swirling around her, replacing doubt with inspiration. Each spoonful she tasted reaffirmed her purpose. This wasn't just a competition. It was a celebration of her journey, a love letter to the flavors of her childhood and the memories held sacred. In her mind, the contest morphed from a pressure cooker of competition to a welcoming hearth. As she stirred, she envisioned herself before the judges not merely as a contender but as an envoy of her heritage. She thought about her ancestors cooking in old-world kitchens, the warmth and resilience that flowed through their veins as they faced their own trials. Clara felt the fiery resolve of those women pushing her forward. With sodden spirits rising, she felt the tight knot of panic loosening its grip. Victory in the contest was less about winning and more about claiming her place in the spectrum of culinary history. Suddenly, a new question took root within her. What if, amid all the pressure and competition, she could inspire others to embrace their stories through food? The day arrived with a thrum of anticipation coursing through her veins. Clara gathered her knives and ingredients, stepping into the spotlight waiting for her in the arena ahead. This would not just be the culmination of her culinary efforts. It would be the first act of her rebirth, a potent dose of empowerment and vulnerability intermingled at last. As she left her home, a final thought ignited recognition in her mind. Could this night reveal not only the hidden chef within her but the pathway to transformation she desperately sought? The air crackled with uncertainty and excitement. What awaited her felt monumental, almost transcendent, but it lay cloaked, just outside her reach. The stage was set, a culinary battleground adorned with sharp knives, gleaming pots, and a subtle hum of anticipation echoing through the air. As Clara stepped into the frenetic energy of the kitchen arena, her heart raced, not entirely from adrenaline but from a deep-rooted sense of purpose. The environment buzzed with seasoned chefs maneuvering with precision, each revealing flashes of their intricate skills. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times, had envisioned it meticulously, yet the reality felt wildly unpredictable. With each subsequent minute, Clara found herself caught in a delicate interplay of focus and anxiety. She was acutely aware of the judges seated before the glossy countertop, their faces stoic and analytical. Would they appreciate the complexities she infused into her dishes? Or would her vulnerabilities become starkly visible? Taking a deep breath, she drew strength from the memories that surrounded her, the laughter shared over meals, the comforting aromas of her grandmother's kitchen, and the warmth of family gatherings formed around food. Those memories danced like fireflies within her, illuminating the dark corners of doubt. Clara took her place at the countertop, settled into the rhythm of preparation, and started with her barley soup. The steam that began to rise coaxed familiar scents from the depths of her subconscious. This was her moment to celebrate traditions, and share a piece of herself. As she chopped fresh herbs with a steady hand, Clara felt a shift within. Each slice resonated with the echoes of her ancestors, their stories intertwined with their techniques. With every stirring motion, she infused her spirit into the dish, intent on capturing the essence of her history. No longer was it about meeting specifications laid out by unnamed judges. It was a dance of authenticity, a reclamation of her identity. Despite this newfound resolve, Clara couldn't shake the pangs of self-doubt that occasionally flickered at the edges of her confidence. It nagged at her like a persistent shadow, questioning her use of flavors and presentation choices. What if the judges didn't see beyond the surface? What if they rejected not just her dish but the very heart of what she sought to convey? Unbeknownst to her, that fear was a double-edged sword, both a burden and a fuel for her creativity. Determined to navigate these conflicting emotions, Clara redirected her focus. She glanced down at her grandmother's journal, nestled under her apron, reminding her of the legacies being woven into her culinary craft. The weight of each word, each recipe was now an anchor pulling her back to purpose. This was more than competition. This was her voice unfolding in a language only she could speak through food. With renewed determination, Clara turned her attention to plating. The artistic element felt like a dance unto itself, forcing her to tap into intuition rather than fear. She poured her soul into arranging the bowl, each element echoing the nostalgia from her grandmother's handwritten notes. Suddenly, it was as if she were standing in the kitchen of her childhood, laughter spiraling through the air, the warmth of close friendships radiating off the ingredients. As Clara completed her first plate, she felt an unexpected rush of exhilaration. Perhaps she had underestimated the extent of what this experience could offer. Beyond the competition, there was a pathway to redefine not only her role as a chef but also her identity as a keeper of family traditions. The realization ignited a spark within her. This was about legacy, a bridge connecting the past to the present, and she was here to share that story. Yet, even as she embraced this newfound clarity, a flicker of apprehension lingered in the murky depths of her mind. Was she truly ready to lay her story bare for others to witness? Would they understand the layers behind her dish? The moment of truth crept ever closer, threatening to expose not just her culinary prowess, but the very vulnerabilities she sought to transform into strength. With each passing second, the countdown transformed from a strain to an exhilarating rhythm, propelling Clara toward what felt like destiny. Could she successfully share her culinary narrative, or would the weight of her vulnerabilities overshadow the glory of her ambitions? As she glanced up, ready to face the judges, she felt the excitement rise. This was her moment. Would she seize it or falter before the return to obscurity? In the silence that followed the presentation of her dish, Clara's heart thudded loudly, drowned only by the muted murmurs of the judges. Their rounds of tasting were thorough and methodical, but she felt as if every bite they took was a measurement of her worth. In those brief moments, doubt gripped her. Had she conveyed the essence of her family's heritage, or had she failed to present it authentically? As she observed their expressions concentrated, yet unreadable, her thoughts spiraled. Clara had done everything she could, guided by her grandmother's spirit, but what if that wasn't enough? Would the plates she poured her heart into resonate in the same way with these strangers who had no idea of her journey? Yet, amid the tension, Clara found a flicker of resolve. She could not let fear overshadow the progress she had already made. The act of cooking had become so much more than technical proficiency. It represented self-discovery, growth, and a dedication to honoring her roots. The spaces of her mind that held self-doubt could be transformed. What if she viewed this as an opportunity for dialogue or even for connection rather than merely judgment? The lead judge, a renowned chef with an impeccable reputation, raised an eyebrow, signaling an impending decision. Clara's breath caught in her throat. As he served another spoonful, she was caught in an internal battleground. Would she let their verdict become a defining moment in her culinary career? Or could she instead frame it as another lesson in her lifelong apprenticeship? Setting aside her turmoil, Clara leaned into the moment. She mentally reviewed her next dish, the one designed to follow the soup. Inspired by her grandmother's traditional pot roast, she envisioned fusing it with modern techniques, the challenge becoming both a tribute and a reinvention. This was not merely a cooking contest but a personal manifesto of who she was, a reflection of growth from the heat of uncertainty. With a deep breath, she gathered her ingredients, the familiar aroma sweeping over her like a protective cloak. As she sliced through the meat, the knife felt more like a scalpel, delineating the old from the new. Every movement carried intention, a redefinition of her connection with food, her culture, and herself. Cooking was no longer just about flavor, it became an exploration of heritage, evolution, and artistry. She worked methodically, navigating each element with newfound clarity, each decision driven not just by hunger for success but by a deep insistence to reveal her journey. Clara savored this freedom. The fear that once influenced her actions now churned into a source of inspiration and creativity. In a final, audacious choice, Clara decided to add a reimagined sauce, a bold move to underline her innovation. This representation of her personal culinary ethos fusing traditional values with contemporary tastes felt like a salute to her grandmother. As the final seconds ticked down, she completed her plating with a sense of satisfaction. This was more than just a dish. It was a symbol of her formative journey, the struggles she had faced, and her commitment to authenticity in a competitive world. Clara glanced at the judges, who were now watching her every move with rapt attention. What new expression would cross their faces next? The tension heightened as she adjusted her own stance, feeling ready to unveil her next dish to them. If the soup had quietly introduced her essence, this plate would command it. As she took a deep breath, part of her wondered would vulnerability reveal her strength this time? But just as she opened her mouth to speak, one of the judges raised a hand, signaling for silence. Clara's heart dropped. What would come next? Would this be the moment that defined or derailed her? The remnants of doubt flared again, not from uncertainty, but the looming prospect of challenge. The lead judge's voice cut through the air like a sharp knife, echoing in the tension-laden silence. Clara held her breath, the weight of expectation filling the space between them. Before we move to your next dish, I must ask you something, he began, his gaze penetrating. What do you believe is the true spirit of your cooking? The question hung in the air, unexpected yet pivotal. All eyes were on her, and the recognition struck sharply. This wasn't just about the food. Clara felt the layers of her identity unfurling slowly, urging her to respond honestly and from the heart. The spirit of my cooking, she paused, casting her thoughts to the countless hours spent honing her craft, particularly the memories of her grandmother at their kitchen table. It's about storytelling, bringing together seasons, memories, and flavors that intertwine. Each dish carries a piece of my family's history, molded by love and tradition. Like my grandmother did, I want my food to evoke memories, to create a bridge between the past and the present. A moment as silence followed, the judges exchanging subtle glances. Clara sensed a change in their demeanor. Here lay an acknowledgement of her authenticity. Yet, with this connection came a flicker of fear. Was it enough to elevate her in this fiercely competitive arena? Appreciable sentiment, murmured the lead judge, sparking a slow nod from his colleagues. But can it translate into the technique and innovation we seek today? Their gaze shifted as Clara's mind raced. She realized this moment could break or make her, and she pushed onward. The pressure ignited an unyielding determination within her. She wanted to show them that her perspective was equally vital as her culinary skills. Perhaps vulnerability would fracture her nerves but might also bind her courage. With a quick adjustment of the plates before her, Clara prepared to present her pot roast. I've also created a sauce that combines traditional and modern elements, she asserted, her voice growing stronger. It's my way of blending past with present, a twist that embodies rebirth. Clara moved to the serving area, her heart pounding as she plated the elegant portions, confident in their visual appeal. While preparing the dish, she had whispered affirmations to herself, envisioning success. Now, each plate glistened with promises both of her personal journey and the legacy she was proudly inheriting. As she presented her dish, a deeper voice in her head urged reflection. Was this achievement enough to cement her commitment to culinary storytelling? Satisfaction mingled with doubt, but she firmly reminded herself, each step taken was about aligning the culinary arts with her truth, The judges began tasting her dish. She observed intently as their expressions shifted. Satisfaction illuminated their faces, a gradual revelation that her fears might dissipate into something extraordinary. The lead judge raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk revealing interest. "Let us consider the depth of flavors here," he remarked. "What made you choose to innovate a traditional recipe in this manner?" Clara understood that this inquiry would allow her to deepen her disclosures. Only this time, the satisfaction wasn't just in the flavors she created but also in the clarity she found within herself. It was about communication and embodiment. "I wanted to honor my roots but also bring them into dialogue with contemporary palates," she answered. The panel exchanged muted murmurs, now more engaged. Each word from Clara felt like a reaffirmation of her path, the seeds of resilience she had planted nurturing the moment. Yet, as the last taste vanished, the air became heavy with expectation once again. What would the final verdict be? Would acknowledgement of her journey translate into triumph? The looming reality posed itself. The moment rested precariously on a precipice of possibility and failure. As she awaited their conclusion, her stomach twisted with anticipation. The prospect of either affirmation or rejection needle-pointed her thoughts, rife with emotional complexity. Would she be met with encouragement, or would this be another hurdle she had to leap? And without warning, the lead judge leaned in closer, preparing to share insights that could either fracture or propel her budding culinary career. Clara braced herself. This was only the beginning of her journey. What wisdom awaited her next? The lead judge inhaled thoughtfully before speaking, an intensity in his expression suggesting that this was not merely an evaluation but a moment that could define Clara's trajectory. "Clara," he began, locking eyes with her, "your presentation today has shown us commitment, yes. But what I'm looking for is a deeper understanding of not just how to innovate, but why innovation matters." His words echoed in Clara's mind, laden with implications she hadn't anticipated. This wasn't only about techniques or flavors. It was about an ethos, a philosophy woven into the fabric of her culinary journey. What had she thought was an impressive twist on tradition now seemed merely a small step in a larger narrative. Why does innovation matter in the culinary world? She whispered to herself, feeling the weight of uncertainty bearing down. She realized that this was not just a question posed to her. It was an invitation to delve deeper into the essence of her culinary identity. Cooking was her art, a canvas on which she painted her heritage, but it was also a living conversation with the world around her. "I believe innovation breathes life into traditions," Clara replied, her voice growing steadier as she found her footing beneath the pressure. "Without it, recipes become stagnant, and the stories they tell diminish. To innovate is to respect the past while provoking thought about the future." She paused, allowing the depth of her convictions to resonate. The judges nodded, their faces a mirror of contemplation. She could see the wheels turning in their minds, the unspoken dialogue about the direction her career could take. Clara's heart raced at the notion that she wasn't just on the brink of judgment. She was participating in a dialogue that could cultivate meaningful change. However, just as a flicker of hope ignited within her, Clara was gripped with a tightening knot of anxiety. Something was shifting inside, a blend of resilience and fear colliding. Would these insights translate into a favorable verdict? Would the judges see the depth of her vision, a vision that broke free from the comfort of tradition while preserving its essence? The lead judge's tone softened, revealing both a challenge and an encouragement. "Then what if one were to take this notion of conversation a step further, Clara? What if you could use your knife not only to chop but to also dissect the cultural narratives behind the foods we cherish?" His words pricked her curiosity, nudging her toward an internal realization. Cooking was never solely about flavors or presentation. It was about the stories that had gotten embedded within those meals, the lives lived around the table, the lessons learned, and the moments shared. She thought of her childhood in her grandmother's kitchen, where meals were more than sustenance. They were gatherings of laughter, tears, and wisdom. Those experiences were jewels she could transform into a greater narrative through food. Understanding that gave her the insight she desperately needed. "I want to transform every dish into a conversation," Clara responded, her conviction solidifying. "I envision meals that ask questions, prompt reflections, and connect people to their own stories. As she finished speaking, the atmosphere shifted yet again. The judges exchanged hushed, excited murmurs. Clara felt as if she was standing on the edge of a precipice, the potential of her aspirations swirling in the air around her. Yet, with that exhilaration also came fear of failing to realize the grand vision she held. "Clara, this isn't just a competition of skill," the lead judge said thoughtfully. "We're looking for chefs who can push boundaries while nurturing the narratives that define them. This might just be your strength, but can you give us proof of this ambition in your next presentation?" His challenge ignited a fierce determination within her. This wasn't merely an opportunity, it had transformed into a mission. Clara felt the adrenaline course through her, igniting a flame of creativity that she had only begun to explore. "Yes," she declared, a newfound conviction ringing in her voice. "I'll show you that heritage can coexist with bold, modern interpretations. I will craft dishes that are not just tasted, but also experienced." As her resolve crystallized, she realized that this was a crossroads leading her toward a deeper understanding of herself as a chef and storyteller. The judge's anticipation mirrored her own aspirations, setting the stage for the challenge ahead. What would her next dish reveal about her journey? Would she rise to the challenge and embrace the transformative potential of her cooking, or would this moment define the boundaries of her ambition? As she immersed herself in thoughts of her next creations, the journey ahead was unfurling, vibrant and unpredictable, urging her to step boldly into artistic exploration. Clara returned home that evening, her mind a storm of inspirations and uncertainties. The judge's questions reverberated through her thoughts, each echo intensifying the weight of her resolve. The culinary image she had forged in her mind was vivid yet so fragile. She needed to weave together her heritage and the innovative approach to create something truly compelling. The kitchen became both refuge and battleground as she experimented tirelessly. The aroma of spices mingled with memories of her grandmother's cooking, anchoring her spirit to the essence of her journey. Memories served not just as a source, but a guiding compass as Clara explored uncharted territories within her culinary landscape. A dish took shape in her imagination, a modernized rendition of her grandmother's famous stew, elevated yet rooted in past narratives, a bridge spanning generations. As she diced onions beneath the harsh glare of the kitchen light, Clara's mind flooded with self-doubt. Would this homage resonate? Could she imbue the stew with richness that communicated the depths of her culinary philosophy? Each chop felt like a conversation with the past. The knife gliding through the onion was a metaphorical scalpel, peeling away the layers to reveal the essence hidden within. But rather than clarity, her own voice faltered, drowned by the swell of expectation. She halted, staring at the pieces before her. What if she went beyond mere fusion? She could infuse the dish with modern techniques, sous vide, perhaps to extract flavors while revealing the care that went into it. This notion of loving technique rooted in a framework of tradition intrigued her. Clara began to pencil notes in her recipe book, mind racing, driven by the notion that innovation could arise from thoughtful tribute. Days bled into nights as Clara meticulously refined the elements of her dish. Voice notes captured her thoughts about flavor combinations, and sketches outlined the plating. Each draft drew her closer to clarity, yet fought against the pervasive doubt that niggled at the corners of her mind. Failure to deliver on this undertaking felt like a personal affront not merely to the judges, but to her history. While working late one night, Clara's phone buzzed. It was Isabel, a fellow chef and confidant, asking about her progress. The casual inquiry broke the pressure bubble that had enveloped her. "I'm swinging for the fences," Clara admitted, her fingers trembling as she messaged back. "But I also feel the weight of every expectation on me." "Sounds like you're engaging in a battle against yourself," Isabel replied. "Don't lock yourself into what you think you should deliver. Make it personal. What does it mean to you?" That simple suggestion struck a chord. Clara took a moment to breathe, understanding that perhaps her vision had strayed toward perfectionism, losing the very emotion she sought to evoke. Cooking was not solely about execution, it was about sustaining a conversation with her roots and inviting others into that exchange. Her cuisine could narrate the stories that shaped her, each plate inviting others to reflect on their journeys. With renewed vigor, Clara returned to the simmering pot of her grandmother's stew, redefining it by layering flavors that represented her past, while adding innovative twists. As she cooked, she focused on the stories she wished to tell, not just the history of her family, but also the evolution of culinary traditions in the modern world. The next day, she would face the judges again. It was about more than just presenting a plate. It was an opportunity to share a piece of her identity. That connection exhilarated and terrified her, knowing full well that vulnerability could lead to greatness or failure. And now, as Clara laid out her ingredients for the final time, she felt ready to embrace both possibilities. What lay ahead was not just the culmination of her dishes, but the unveiling of herself, raw and unfiltered. The clock was ticking, and the echoes of the judges' questions remained front and center in her mind. Tomorrow would not only test her culinary skill, it would probe the depths of who she was. Would she emerge as a chef who transcends her limits, or would she crumble under the weight of expectation? Clara woke early the next morning, the faint light filtering through her windows barely breaking the darkness still clinging to her thoughts. The weight of the impending presentation pressed heavily on her chest, a reminder that today was pivotal not just for her culinary dreams but for the very essence of her identity. She moved through the kitchen like a well-rehearsed routine, her body instinctually reaching for ingredients as her mind spun in circles of doubt. A quiet warrior dress of focus wrapped around her as she prepped her grandmother's stew. Each ingredient, a gesture of affection. Each chop, a reaffirmation of purpose. As she poured broth into the pot, she allowed the familiar process to ground her. The sound of bubbling liquid offered a soothing rhythm, momentarily silencing the chaotic chorus of self-doubt in her mind. But the calm was short-lived as the memories surged back, a collage of disappointment punctuated by moments where she felt she fell short of expectations. Clara had always striven for perfection. It was a trait bred from both love and pressure. The fervent desire to honor her heritage seemed less a source of motivation and more a boulder anchoring her to the depths of anxiety. What if her vision was too ambitious? What if the judges didn't see the soul she intended to pour into her dish? Pushing the thoughts aside, she focused on technique. The sous vide meant precision, a modern method that intrigued her and countered the imprecision she felt from the emotional weight of the past. Clara pulled herself back into the present, glancing at her notes, reviewing the flavor combinations that spurred her imagination. Here was the foundation of her identity, her innovation rooted in her family's story. As the stew simmered, she reflected on Isabel's words. They echoed with clarity that nearly brought her to tears. It wasn't merely about impressing others. It was an invitation to share her lineage. Clara realized that this dish wasn't about showcasing culinary skills alone, it was an extension of her voice that longed to be heard. This understanding fueled her determination, but also birthed a new dilemma. Could her dish truly reflect the struggle and beauty of generations? She wrestled with the idea that her own vulnerability would lay bare the complexity of her identity. Taking a deep breath, Clara began to see her task as more than creating a meal. It was storytelling through flavor. The intensity of her resolve strengthened with each passing moment. She meticulously plated her dish, mindful of how each element represented a part of her heritage. The stewed aromatic proteins layered with modernist garnishes created a visual feast, a canvas of contrasting textures and flavors. It was a conversation piece, rich with history yet undeniably present. But as she stood back to admire her creation, excitement mixed with fear. Would the judges appreciate this melding of the old and new? Would they understand the vulnerability behind her choices? The fear of rejection gnawed at her, but the thought of sharing this story propelled her forward. As she loaded her dish into the presentation box, her heart raced. The time had come to confront the very expectations that had haunted her. This was not just about the food, this was about Clara Hill staking her claim as a chef, a storyteller, and an artist unafraid to showcase her true self. The moments ticked away like a relentless clock, echoing the urgency within her. Standing at the threshold of vulnerability, Clara faced the uncertainty head-on, ready to step into a challenge that could either sink or elevate her resolve. The judges awaited, and so did a reflection of her identity. With her heart pounding, she made her way toward the judges' table, aware that everything she had poured into her dish and herself was about to be laid bare. How would her story resonate against the backdrop of their expectations? Clara would find out soon enough. And in that moment of anticipation, just before she reached them, a thought struck her with piercing clarity. Would she embrace her journey, or would she let the fear of judgment keep her tethered to the past? Clara stepped forward with her heart racing and a determination forged through her struggles. This was at the culmination of her journey. The judges, seated with an air of authority, awaited her presentation. With a deep breath, she placed her carefully crafted dish before them, the vibrant colors and inviting aromas drawing their attention. "This dish represents my family's history," Clara began, her voice steady yet imbued with the emotion she felt. "It's a modern take on my grandmother's stew, infused with flavors that honor tradition while also embracing innovation." She explained each element: the tender meat cooked using sous vide for exquisite flavor retention, the garden-fresh herbs representing her roots, and how these components spoke of both resilience and adaptability, the core messages she had gleaned from the stories of her ancestors. Each word she spoke intertwined her culinary narrative with the essence of her identity, pulling her fears into the light. As the judges tasted her dish, Clara felt the weight of her past dissolve. What had once been looming fears turned to bubbles of hope as she observed their expressions shifting from analytical to contemplative. The lead judge paused, his eyebrows lifted in intrigue as he took another bite, mirroring a sense of engagement in Clara's narrative. After the tasting, the silence felt electric. The lead judge finally nodded, breaking the stillness. "Clara, you've shown a deep connection to your culinary roots while bringing a refreshing perspective. This is precisely what we look for, a conversation that transcends borders." A wave of relief washed over her, mingling with pride. She had not only prepared a dish but had communicated her essence, her struggles, and her heritage. This was more than a contest, it had become a platform for her to reclaim her identity, to celebrate her journey amid the whirling doubts that had once plagued her. The other judges echoed his sentiments, praising her creativity and authenticity. Their words validated the insecurity that had threatened to undo her but instead had become a catalyst for growth. Clara felt recognized not just as a chef, but as a keeper of tradition, an innovator infused with the spirit of both past and future. Days later, the results were announced, and as Clara's name rang through the auditorium, a brilliant warmth spread within her. She had not only achieved recognition, she had conquered the inner battles that had once held her hostage. Winning wasn't a validation of her worth, it was proof that her journey mattered. Clara stood taller now, embodying a solid confidence that enveloped her like a comforting embrace. Transitioning from that moment forward, Clara became an advocate for cooking as a form of storytelling. She sought out opportunities to demonstrate her heritage-infused kitchen, offering workshops that combined practical skills with the rich narratives of ancestry. Each gathering became a celebration of not just sustenance but the tales knitted into culinary practices where every chop and simmer carried the weight of history. She finally found peace with her self-worth, stepping confidently into her role as a chef and a mother. Tommy, who had always been her beacon of motivation, watched her with admiration, his own identity shaping amidst the roots of culinary pride she instilled. Clara had emerged not just stronger, but fulfilled, having crafted her own narrative from the remnants of struggle. In the end, her grandmother's journal sat proudly on the shelf, a testament to the legacy she had forged anew. Clara had transcended her self-doubt and had proven not only to the world around her but, more importantly, to herself, that triumph isn't just about victory, it's about the journey, the lessons learned, and the courage to embrace one's truth. So, as her final chapter unfolded, Clara looked onto the horizon with renewed vigor, ready to share her discoveries with the world, one delicious story at a time. Now is your moment. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment below with your thoughts and theories about this incredible conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear these empowering messages.